Hello, everyone. This is Jefferson. I'm from the Fresno State Creative Writing Alumni Chapter. Got my Fresno Writers. I'm on brand tonight with my tea. Welcome tonight for Fresno Writers Live. It's about 5 after 7. By the time I get done with my welcome remarks, I'm sure we may have a couple more late participants. Again, thanks so much for coming. This organization is part of the Fresno State Alumni Association. We're one of the many chapters through Fresno State Alumni. And we're super grateful that they support us in these endeavors to kind of unite multiple generations of Fresno writers and with our friends in the community. So tonight you're going to meet Ronald Dzerigian in just a few moments. He's going to introduce Anthony, and then later he will moderate the Q&A. Of course, we're here to hear Anthony's amazing poetry tonight. A couple shout outs and acknowledgments as we get started. First, I want to say a big thanks to our friends at the Alumni Association, especially Peter Robertson, my good friend who encourages us in our work every day. Thanks also to Nicole Traverso and Corrine Wong Stack for their administrative assistance for this event. I'd also like to give a shout out to some of my fellow alumni on the planning committee of this chapter. They're fantastic people, and we've had a great time planning this event. Those folks are out in the audience tonight. Esmeralda Gamez, Gabriel Ibarra, Steven Sanchez, Courtney Hughes, and Camila Okafor. And then behind the scenes tonight for the chapter, I mentioned Ronald Dzerigian, our VP. He's going to be hosting officially. We also have Ethan Chatanye as kind of the room's host, and appreciate his technical skills tonight. And a special shout out tonight to MFA graduate student Carissa Ellison, who's also assisting us with some of the tech stuff on the back end. Carissa has been fantastic. She and her student group, San Joaquin Literary Association, hosted one of these online events back in March, right when the pandemic broke out. Carissa and her crew did an event with Dinez Smith, and it was really electric. And that whole experience kind of gave me the inspiration and the fuel to do this again here tonight. So thanks to everybody for being here tonight. Thanks to everyone who's assisted and made this event possible. For now, we're going to turn it over to Ronald. My last plug is we do have 2 more readings coming up this summer. One in late July with Daniel Chacon, his new book of stories, Kafka in a Skirt. And then one in early August with JJ Ansalmi, his new book, Doomed to Fail. So check us out on Facebook, Fresno State Creative Writing, to get all the details for that. So for now, MFA alum, poet, and pretty much a wonderful writer, great guy, Ronald Dzerigian, to introduce Anthony. Take it away, Ronald.
Thanks, Jefferson. Yeah, this is awesome. Jefferson and I and the rest of the group, we're all really excited to face this situation boldly, and not let us being stuck at home stop us from celebrating Anthony's work. You should all get that book. His book is amazing. It's right here. You can order it through Omindawn.com, and you can also get a signed copy from his website, anthonycody.com. If you haven't done this already, and maybe it's already set up this way for you, or if you're unfamiliar with Zoom, if you hover your cursor over to the right-hand corner and look at that little grid, you can change it to speaker view. That way you'll see Anthony's full page when he shares it to you, because one of the things you're going to notice is a true gift about reading his work is seeing it on the page, as it should be with poetry, right? I'm going to go ahead and read my little excerpt, and you're going to have to forgive me here because it sounds a little bit like a eulogy. Sorry, Anthony. At first, but it changes tone, you'll see. One of the great gifts of pre-COVID Fresno State was being able to run into Anthony at the Henry Madden Library. I work on the floor above the Laureate Lab, where he'd often be stationed. Now, many can vouch for me on this, that when we talk to Anthony about poetry, we often find ourselves in the middle of making a poem. And poems should challenge us. His work on the page and in conversation challenges us. It does just that. It pushes us to question the very tools we use to communicate, and especially question the forces behind those tools. Reading his work makes me question how we use our primary tools, the hand and the mouth. Here's a few of his lines. I find Grandpa's alien registration card in a box of tools, the things required. I read this and I want to question the idea of requirement. Borderland Apocrypha is not just a book of poems, it's necessary. This and all of his future books will prove Anthony's work as a significant element in the foundation of what's to come for poetry and for literature in general. Let's also not forget he's a Fresno poet. He's a Contamundo Fellow. He's a member of the Hmong American Writers Circle. He's an associate editor for Noemi Press. He's been published in numerous respected literary journals. I consider him a friend and an ally, even though he makes fun of me all the time. Please welcome the winner of the Omindawn Open, author of Borderland Apocrypha, Anthony Cody.
Thank you, Ronald. You're right, it did start a little bit like a eulogy, but I appreciate that. I appreciate your words. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that today's reading is being held on the traditional lands of the Yokut and Mono people. I pay my respect to our native elders, both past and present, and to this land. May each of us present continue to honor the true stewards of these lands and the land itself. I just also want to thank each and every one of you. It kind of is super exciting to see faces from all different aspects of my past come into one giant virtual room. So I just want to say thank you, everyone out there who I'm seeing, who we've crossed paths over the years. It's good to see everyone's faces right now. I also want to thank the Creative Writing Alumni Association, Jefferson, Ethan, Ronald, Carissa, thank you for spending the time with me. Camila, Stephen, Gabe, I appreciate your help. Courtney, thank you so much. Before I begin reading poems from the book, I do want to say tonight's a special night. Jefferson and I didn't realize this at the time, but when he threw out dates on the calendar, we just threw out, just a whole bunch of different dates. I said, no, how about the next week after that? And it ended up that tonight is my late grandmother's, it would be her 82nd birthday tonight. And so I'm grateful for that, that moment. And I want to honor that moment by actually reading a relatively old poem that I wrote for her that some of you have heard before. And it'll kind of help enter us into the space. Lemon cura, for the absence of stomach aches and my grandmother. She begins the cura, holding my hand, holding the lemon, asking my knotted stomach to untie itself, unwind itself, and become at ease. She starts chopping the yellow halves, quarters, then eighths, squeezes and collects into a large glass, a pinch of salt thrown, a silver fork to stir, 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 making the seeds dance, chasing after salt, wanting rest, settling, settling, settling. Ready, tómalo, drink, drink, drink it all at once. No leftovers, just semillas. A shot of lemon. Done. Raise the glass. Inspect the seeds. Plant them. I wanted just to really do that, just to honor my grandmother's memory, and just thank you all for being here. Ronald did, funny enough, pointed out, yes, this is my book. Here it is, Borderland Apocrypha. I should also give a shout out to someone in the audience right now, Russell Morris, for giving me the idea to actually hit up our other friend, Josue Rojas, who actually did the cover art. I would not have done that or thought about doing that had he not given me that advice. So the book primarily was written during my time away in Chicago. I was at Fresno State for 4 years. One of those years I took off, actually, my partner, she and I went to Chicago. And in that year, I just kind of had collected time to really start writing really directly and just only writing. So that helped me to make this happen. And one of the things I found in starting to do the research around the book, because I should say, as I start talking about this, a bit of a trigger warning, because a lot of the work is going to talk about lynchings, specifically Mexican lynchings in the Southwest, following the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So there will be some moments where I do talk about the lynchings themselves. So that really, I should say, happened over that time. And the first poem is actually triggered by a moment before that, when I was at a Walgreens or a Duane Reade, depending on where you're at in this country right now, trying to get a passport photo. And someone asked me, "Are you trying to run off? What's going on?" And so that's actually the first poem I'm going to read from the book. And like Ronald said, I will be doing some screen sharing of the poem so you can look along, watch along. So let's give this a go. Standing in line to take a passport photo, a white man, an old white man, looks at me and claims I am running. Standing here because my grandpa ran away from home to sell perfume in Zocalo at 9. In line, I am a lot of things, and since I am a lot of things, I am everything he cannot imagine. A passport photo asks me to 2 by 2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chambers of my heart turn tusk. An old white man is not Gil Scott-Heron saying, "Because I always feel like running," not away because there is no such place, is not how you pronounce exile or escapar. Looks at me how Teddy Roosevelt died coveting a white buffalo. Claims I am afraid. No, I am a wall. No, I am a mirror. I am still, so still. And I'm gonna get some water now. It's a very different experience doing this from, behind the Zoom camera. But one of the things you'll see about this poem is you'll see that there are some notations, some footnotes. The whole opening section of the book is actually a cascading series of of poems based on each of these stanzas. So I will go on to the next poem, which I believe is a few further down the way. And it's titled, "A Passport Photo Asks Me to 2 by 2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chamber of my heart turn tusk." I should say that, I don't know, for those of you who didn't see clearly, or I don't remember if that got announced, but we'll do a Q&A after. So for those of you who have any questions or anything, Ronald and I will be talking and have a chance, each of you, to, I don't know, roast me or ask questions. A passport photo should be mailed to the federal government with my birth certificate, and I wonder if they will return. Consider the power of printed paper. Asks me daily, am I brown? Am I white? Am I am, am I am, am I am, I am. I wonder when the tense transitions. 2 by 2 myself, a neat shape, raises no questions and tells you no lies. Capture what I am in neutral. I have yet to see a sunrise in the shadow, or a child birth itself from the inside of a Joshua tree, and this does not mean it is not possible. The chamber of my heart is quiet, quiet, the outside of a pole striving into fire. Turn tusk, turn dusk, turn day, turn lengua, turn lingua, turn franca, turn español, turn sombra, así, atrás, ahí, acá, to here, yes, here, yes, here, it is dark. This next poem, actually, I should say, I think Ronald referenced part of it. You can see that there is an image, and this is a photo I actually took when helping clean out my grandfather's tool shed. And inside the box was his alien registration card. And so thankfully, with the invention of smartphones, I was able to take off my gloves, snap a photo, and years later, it found its way in a poem. Looks at me how Teddy Roosevelt died coveting a white buffalo. Looks at me as a mirror, and a mirror has no voice in the exchange. How I find Grandpa's alien registration card in a box of tools, the things required. Teddy Roosevelt was drawn by Martin Ramirez, or so I have now invented. The Red Rider, frenzy-eyed and bullet-fashioned, may, in fact, leap from a horse that will buck him off first. Teddy is gnawed in a manner of mirrors inside a forest of cartography. He's going west. He'll be institutionalized, tuberculosis and schizophrenia. He will not be president. Martin has conjured a labyrinth. He walks through, Teddy stays. Died is a static word, used by people to tell others a movement or a person is final and gone. What if I write, I breathed in the air of my grandma the moment she became atomic? What if I write, outside of what the human eye can see, the atomic is infinite? What if I write, a border can be built or raised, but never atomic? I'll stop and share just for a moment while I kind of scroll through and catch my breath and realize my own way to some of these poems. So I think I have mentioned that a good portion of the book is sort of historical, in that I began doing research. I can't even think, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, really specifically around lynchings of Mexican and Mexican Americans following the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And it's something I never actually had time before to fully dive into research study. So the time away allowed me to do that. And one of the things I began kind of looking up and seeing is how this work not only is situated within the experience of that acquisition of land, so to speak, in terms of the colonizer taking all this land, but also how that work extends historically over the time to now. So in the sense that how 1848 in a lot of ways is not that distant from 2020. And you kind of see these moments and elements in the work when we start talking about vigilance committees and how those translate to civilian patrols and how those turn into sheriffs. And now at this precipice in time when we're working towards trying to find justice for people who are murdered by the police. So I'm going to come back to a poem, which is the middle section, which is you'll see epigraphs and things, and those was part of the research that I kind of kept on turning out and turning up and seeing, and I couldn't not keep writing. Nopales, a Mexican lynching number 39. The epigraph reads, Mexicans have no business in this country. I don't believe in them. The men were made to be shot at. The women were made for our purposes. I am a white man. I am. A Mexican is pretty near black. I hate all Mexicans. April 6th, 1850, Stockton Times op-ed. A nopal could be weeping, but who examines las espinas closely as the blossoms? A fire quema todo, pero salva los que cubren la llama. A nopal could be quiet, but who plunges each thorn into the drum and swallows? The rust no es una cortina para parar el torrente. Nopal could be asleep, but who kicks the hibernating until sunrise shows they are countless? The drought is rooted in birth, en un paciencia de ríos. This is actually one of, I believe this is the first poem that I wrote around the lynching specifically. I think I ended up taking it to a workshop at Fresno State. One of the things that is, one of the realities about the lynchings is the first person actually who was lynched in California was a woman by the name of Josefa Segovia. And even interestingly enough, her name and identity was not known for many years. Juana in some cases, and just sort of how the identity has been erased over time or reimagined or talked about. Long story short, she owned property in Downeyville, which is up north, kind of northeast of Sacramento area. And she was attacked. She fought back. She stabbed someone. They weren't happy. It was around the 4th of July. They had built a stage to celebrate the 4th of July, and in a demonstration, they lynched her, but instead she actually jumped before they could carry out the act. La Sirena, a Mexican lynching. After the hanging death of Josefa Segovia, Downeyville, California, July 5th, 1851. Guilt is not guilty, is not free, is not news, is not jury, is not self, is not a defense, is not judge, is not verdict, is not appeal, is not the ways in which a miner pans and pans and pans and pans and pans until a fleck appears. Eventually something must be found. Eventually someone must let the blade taste, make, tear. A seam, uncooked is the point in which a man spills red from the white, heat glowing and heavy until she stops him, until the town claims siren, claims capital. Josefa is not Juana, is not Juanita, is not an assembled bridge of independence atop the Yuba River, now court, now kangaroo, now news and song, left to walk through, left to float above, left to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and how all men are created equal, until a border born, and there is money to be made, Until man is not labor, is not woman, is not Mexican, is not white, is not the moment a town stops to watch a person face the crowd and wrap a rope around the neck, claims leap. In the air, flight is real, as probable as the moment of weightlessness before the snap, before the eyes decide to untangle the dark, the other, the unknown, before the river parts and kicks below until they say she is consumed, until they accept silences, until she dives with a deep breath of water. The people accept her body thrashes beneath surface, but this is not burial. This is a defiance, a kicking, singing chant. Now I'm gonna need to have a little water break. One of the things I should also say about the work is because it is graphic in nature, a lot of times, and for instance, in the part of the book you just saw, I intentionally omitted any sort of graphic to trying to avoid sort of, I guess, a bit of like lynching porn, essentially, trying to move away from that and wanting to tell that story in a way that is not driven by those acts, those violences, even though the work is obviously triggered by that. So let's get back to this reading. This is a variety of a few different things in this poem. It's partially a found poem, partially a series of mistranslated experiments, and also sort of a voice in the poem of the tree. Artifacts on a hanging tree, Goliad, Texas, a series of 70 Mexican lynchings, 1857. Well, I'm going to read the epigraph, which is the marker for the site. Site for court sessions at various times from 1846 to 1870. Capital sentences called for the courts were carried out immediately by means of a rope and convenient limb. Hangings not called for courts occurred here during the 1857 Cart War, a series of attacks made by Texas freighters against Mexican drivers along the Indianola, Goliad, San Antonio road. About 70 men were killed, some of them on this tree, before the war was halted by Texas Rangers. State Historical Survey Committee Texas marker near the tree. And these are when I wrote the poem, these were the last 5 reviews from TripAdvisor as of June 23rd, 2018. I will say that after I wrote this, I did look back at the TripAdvisors and they still had kind of the same thing. Title, Love Old Courthouses, June 20th, 2018. Review. This hanging tree was just a bonus on the courthouse square, and the history that took place there was moving. Title, Spooky when you think of the tree's use, June 18th, 2018. One of the sites in Goliad is the hanging tree, a beautiful tree which is used to mete out justice after trials. Title, Beauty of a Tree, June 19th, 2018. Review, well, the name sort of says it all, but that is a beautiful tree. The courthouse is a class Texas courthouse, so the day was great. Title, Interesting in a gruesome kind of way, May 27th, 2018. Review. This is a huge oak tree outside the courthouse in Goliad. You really can picture the sentences being carried out. Title, Huge Alive Oak Tree, May 7th, 2018. Review. The tree is located in the center of town on the grounds of the county courthouse. The tree has quiet the history. When convicted, the prisoner was locked outside and hanged from this magnificent live oak tree. Talk to the oak tree. Ask the city to tear you down. City fortifies with stone. Ask town to go into hiding. State erects metal plaque. Ask tourists to leave, and they test your strength to hold their weight. Ask them if they notice your shadow's shape is a mass burial of twitching legs. Let them memory. El Árbol number 10 is a series of narrowing translations. El que hay buen árbol se arrima, buena sombra le cobija. He who wears a good tree is blanketed by good shade. The one that comes to a good tree, good shadow blankets them. To near the tree, receive a blanket of shadow. To near the tree is to blanket yourself in darkness. I am going to skip ahead a bit from what I was planning on reading. So I'm going to do two more, another from this section, just because I think it kind of continues that through line to what I was talking about in terms of where we are in this moment in the historical context. And then I'll read actually the closing poem of the book. One second. El Arpa, a Mexican lynching number 53. The Epigraph. The office of sheriff is a critical part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. We must never erode this historic office. Jeff Sessions, former U.S. Attorney General, February 12, 2018, to the National Sheriff's Association. 1. The inheritance of the air is never a dandelion dispersal scattershot, floating beyond fences, growing elsewhere. The inheritance of the elsewhere is a cave of collapse. The cave of collapse is work. The work is never inheritance of the heirs or the heirs' heir, as well as the heirs' heirs' heir. The inheritance of repetition is a soundless gavel buried in a shallow grave. 6. The shallow grave is the redness of the bouquet a florist selects. 7. The bouquet is a leaning into the quiet of a funeral. 8. The quiet of a funeral is the Americas. 9. The Americas is a platform built by the settlers, sheriffs, and miners for the lynching of the other. 10. The lynching is in a vigilance committee of NAFTA, Operation Wetback, Maquiladoras, ICE, silences the agricultural prison industrial complex, congressmen, and US presidents. 11. The silence is a gerrymandering of census data. 12. The census data is learning about the word incarceration through the storytelling project playing on public radio. 13. The incarceration is an ombligo of shirts in a forest of screams. 14. The ombligo is feeding again and never hungry. 15. The feeding is a church of excommunications inside a cage of teeth. 16. The cage of teeth is elected into office. 17. The elected are voting to eliminate whatever and everything. 18. The voting are no longer asking permission. 19. The permission is trafficking. 20. The trafficking is now asked to self-report. 21. The self-report is now asked to fill out a binary form in ink online. 22. The binary is seeking a fourth option during the election. 23. The election is a wall. 24. The wall is a type of silence. 25. The silence is a type of America. 26. The type of America is in the arrest. 27. The arrest is defined as a cessation or stoppage of motion. 28. The cessation or stoppage of motion is the fabric veiling the artifice. 29. The fabric veiling the artifice is a factory of harps. 30. The factory of harps is a maker of a stringless harp. 31. The stringless harp is the mute progeny. 32. The mute progeny is now the inheritance of the air. Okay, so I'll read this last one. I'll turn off my screen share for now and actually talk for a bit before I close it. When I think about the book, one of the things that always weighed on me when I was making it and writing it was this idea that I don't want to exist. I don't want us to exist inside the wound, inside the harm, inside the pain that has been caused historically. I wanted a way forward, and I think for me, I attempted to want to work towards that as I exited the final section of the book, so that not only am I recognizing this moment and this history, but also where from here. So I'm going to read the title poem, which is Borderland Apocrypha. Borderland Apocrypha. If your father tells you, and your teacher tells you, and the pastor at your family's church tells you to perceive breath for existing, heart for source, grave as final, voice as kingdom, and the shaking as the escape of the earth's heat, you believe the repetition. But don't. Believe that earthquakes are fed by the buried, shoulders leaning in and sinewed by the unseen, combative to covert. Recall that beneath you, nothing is still. Recall that beneath you are the others. No, there is no such thing as living. Living is a birth to control you, to fear no longer being present, to fear this, whatever your this is, can leave you. The night's knuckle on your door is not consent, but a decay of the ego, unheard. A nearness unknown until an apnea arrives, tearing you from the bed for the noose, the blade, the bullet, the fingers forcing the larynx. You were never living. Your father will never tell you. The priest and the prophet and the succulent on the windowsill will not stop you and say you are not living. You are present. Some tomorrow there will be no sunrise. None will say, where is? They will believe you are no longer. Your blood will mourn. The other will gather to publicly demonstrate. Life is proprietary. Do not listen. Join the present at the tectonic and continue to be. Push. Press your ear against the mantle to hear the sound of the pavement's rupture. Push. The city will not sleep. Push. The flora, fauna, stone, nod. You have always been present. Push. A valley is a quiet, whether cradling or culling. Push. The television and the paper will say the fault is active. Push. The scientists will diagram the earth half to demonstrate why nothing remains static. Push. The present remain. Here. Push. Here. Push. Here. Leave. Return. You exist. Push. You are present. Push. Swallow them into quiet. Thank you.
That ending with that feels like a directive, like that we should all take, right, Anthony? Thank you for that. That was an amazing reading. We have, now we're going to enter the Q&A session, and for those of you who have a question for Anthony, as Jefferson wrote in the chat earlier, feel free to type in your questions into the chat room thing, module thing, and we'll read those questions. And oh yeah, so Jefferson said, yeah, if folks have questions, leave them here. But yeah, there's already some questions here. And I'm happy to see these here because they're similar to the questions I had for you, Anthony. So I'm going to start with Steven Sanchez. I appreciate the way you addressed the first lynching in California by shifting the focus from the act to the implications of it. Do you feel like there might be a purpose for including violence in poetry, addressing these kinds of subjects? I'm always worried about doing what you said you didn't want to do, which is engaging in a form of lynching / trauma porn. But also wonder if you think there might be a way to approach it.
That's a good question. I remember a distinct moment. I was actually at a writer's fellowship. I was actually at the community of writers at Squaw Valley, and it's a 7-day, day in day out workshop, generative workshop. Go to class, workshop your poems, go work on poems, workshop, cycle 7 days. And there was a moment where I want to say like 3 or 4 poems that didn't make it past like draft 0.7, where I felt like I had entered into that space where it was like, how can I begin to shock you with the atrocities without, in a way that almost centers not only the harm, but also it centers myself, right? Because these are all moments of historical importance that are not directly tied to me. But that's kind of that, and that was kind of an admission of my own, but also in terms of, I was having a discussion with a few other people about this, and it was like, talking that through in that same way that you're saying that Stephen, you've asked the question, is like, okay, how does that work? And I always think back to that moment where I'm like, okay, now I'm writing poems for me, and that's not why I started this. I'm writing poems to honor the people who have passed and make sure that we can effectively monument these harms, not in the way that we've suddenly erected Robert E. Lee for something, or what have you, as we see now, but in a way that honors the people who actually were harmed. And in some cases, and even in the book, there are places that I do allude to where myself being biracial, of being both white and Mexican, I'm essentially both the lyncher and the lynchee at any given time. And that's also its own reckoning that I deal with within the book too. But that's kind of how I look at it. I'm always trying to think about trying to center them first and trying to pull myself back out.
Great answer. That actually leads me to a question. You talk about a reckoning that you have to have, or that you have to face, being biracial and being the lyncher and the lynched at the same time. And that requires a type of honesty that is terrifying for some people. So, this is sort of branching off of Stephen's question, but, where there's this idea that there's a necessity to show a truth. And how do you choose? Like you said earlier, during your reading, you said you chose to omit certain things. So how do you choose what to show and what to omit? And how do you get to the point where you feel like you're honest enough with yourself that you've earned that right?
I think it's, when working on any poem or any book, it is truly like a relationship you're establishing with something, with someone, with that. And so it's in some ways the amount of time and the amount of care you put into that. You put, what do they say? A relationship is work. What you put into it is what you expect to get out. And that's kind of how I looked at this book, of this extended relationship. And those of you who are on like my text threads will know that there was a very, very long time where all you were going to get from me in those emails or in those texts were horrors, and the things that every day I would peel back another layer, look back at another crime, and just think, Jesus Christ, what the hell is happening? It's still happening, and we just normalized it to the point of just putting nicer names and nicer branding on it, or so they think. So I guess kind of circling back and honoring that and working through that, that's really how I looked at it, of going through and kind of having that dialogue with my friends, with people who are close to me about the work, about what's happening, even my own parents. I mean, my mom and dad are on this call, and they'll know that, you know, the things we've talked about over the almost 40 years of my life have been kind of deconstructing our biases, our wrongs, and kind of reckoning with that and trying to make sure that this year is better than last year, and this decade doesn't look like 2 decades ago. And I think that's important work that we all have to collectively do.
Yeah, absolutely. I got another comment here, and I think it's quite poignant. Gabriel said, "Honesty is," he's responding directly to my statement, "Honesty is only terrifying if you're living a lie." And that's absolutely true. And that's exactly why we have to take those steps toward honesty, even if we are living a lie and are terrified by it, right? So you're deciding to, you decided to share your findings with your immediate friends and possibly family members, probably other writers. I have a great question. Well, I hope it's a great question, but how did their responses inform you?
I think in terms of, you kind of know when you've like stepped too far in a situation. It's like, wait, you need to back up. You need to back way up. And where are you in this? And why are you doing this? So I feel like I think I keep my friends that way. Like we, how we hold each other accountable, but also like, what's wrong with this? Or why is this? Or is this too much? Or is this not enough? I remember having this conversation with someone. He was a very nice older man, and he had read one of my poems that I was working on. He says, have you seen the art of Ken Gonzalez Day? And Ken Gonzalez Day is someone I was familiar with at the time. He actually does photographs of hanging trees and of lynching sites in the Southwest. And one of the things he also does is he takes the old photographs that document the lynchings and actually photoshops the bodies out of the lynchings. And we had this conversation about that honesty and sometimes the horror that our imagination can create by the wrongs that have been done, that are in some ways can be more impactful as we engage in text. We are then forced to do the labor of imagining that wrong right there, and that can have that lasting impact.
That makes a lot of sense. So we have the lynching is interrogated here, but also you're interrogating the human body, both as metaphor and as a literal symbol, but also you're interrogating language. And there are a couple of comments here. You're also, so not only you're interrogating language here, but you're also interrogating form. And a couple of folks, this question is going to come up. Questions about your form. So this is from Gabriel again, how did Anthony decide where to put the words? And he mentioned this, I like Gabriel's honesty. It feels slightly confusing at first. And that can be jarring. You open this book and if you're not used to exploring experiments in form, you may not know where to start. So this question's twofold, actually. How did you decide where to put the words, which is probably a hard question to answer, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And then also, what informed these decisions? And this is from Angel. What informed your decisions to lean to a certain form, and I'm going to add, and maybe abandon it too.
It's funny because when we start talking about form, it's a twofold question, right? And I think some of us always encountered this. We can do two things. We can talk about the trauma, or we can talk about the form. And I always feel like maybe we don't have to talk about the form. But we've talked about the trauma, so I'll talk about the form. It's really interesting. There's two things I'll talk about to kind of like couch this to begin with. The first being, oh gosh, I want to say 2001, 2002. I actually took an undergraduate class with Felipe Herrera, the poet laureate, former poet laureate of the United States, and I guess they're a homie of mine now, which is it's its own mind-boggling thing. But he said, hey, you should check out this writer. You should check out this guy, Andres Montoya. You should check out his poems. He's good. He's, he and he didn't say that he had passed away. He had. So that was one of the most devastating things to learn. That's a writer that you like fall in love with is actually who you think's relatively still around isn't. But there's a poem in here in The Ice Worker Sings and other poems that I'm pulling up right now, and just going to show it to you very quickly via my screen. And you can just see, if you look at it, you can see those maybe tab spaces horizontally on the page. And to like 21-year-old me who hadn't really been into a lot of poetry writing, those were like these momentous gaps, like canyons between the text. That liberated my brain in a different way. Instead of thinking left margin down, I started thinking the field, the entire page. So I've always sort of gravitated towards this movement across the page and moving around where to go. And then kind of, fast forward a few years later, almost 20 years later, I talking again to Juan Felipe in the Laureate Lab with a few of us, and he says, you know what? We're in the Laureate Lab, abandon the left margin. We're not left margin people. And like it kind of like circled back to in my own brain to that moment of reading this poem in Andres's book and thinking, okay, I can, yeah, that's what I always want to do anyway. And kind of and opening that space and pushing it out wide or pulling it down and kind of just peppering the page and kind of almost like it would be like painting where you put something somewhere, the happy tree wasn't in the right place. You have to take that off. And going that route, I don't know why I just threw out a Bob Ross reference, but I'm like, okay. But thinking about it in terms of the work, one of the things that I did want to do was I wanted us to slow down. I want us to collectively slow down when we get this book, when we open the poems, and we have to sort of navigate through it. Because it's not necessarily incredibly experimental or incredibly like I've never seen anything like this. Things look familiar. Those opening poems kind of look like a sentence tree, kind of look like a timeline. They read left to right, down. They read by themselves. And I kind of wanted to use that moment, that opening, as sort of almost like a legend to inform the reader of what's coming next and how to start navigating through the rest of it. And this is like phase one, and then each subsequent section will be sort of an escalation until something towards the end that coalesces back again. I don't know if I even made any.
Yeah, that totally.
If I came to a. Okay.
I agree, and I'm going to say that the more time, for those that might open this book and feel a little bit intimidated by the form, the more time you spend with it, the more familiar territory it will become for you, because we're used to looking at paintings, we're used to looking at maps, and Cody does a really great job here of leading us through with what might look like an abstraction at first. So we're going to come to a close here because we've run out of time. However, one last comment here from Lee. I believe that's Lee Herrick. Not a question, but only huge congratulations to Anthony. Such a brilliant and wonderful reading. Thank you. He said, oh, no, that's Jefferson. Sorry. I was about to read Jefferson's comment to me. But and then also, you know, I believe your parents are on too. So Cora and Douglas Cody, like,
That's right.
Congratulations to you too for giving birth to this master of language. We're all very appreciative to you for giving him to us. So I guess, Anthony, thank you so much for doing this for us, and thank you all for showing up. And I'm going to take a moment here for us to all give a round of applause to Anthony, but I'd really like to suggest that you put your screens on gallery view so you can see everybody applauding Anthony and his hard work.
Hello, everyone. I can see all your faces.
It's nice to see all those appreciative folks out there.
Awesome. It's good just to see everybody. It's like we're all in total weird isolation hermit mode right now at times. It's good to be together. I love all you guys.